Welcome back to Leaders on Purpose podcast. I'm your host, Manal Bernoussi. Today, I'm thrilled to announce our special guest, Rania Batrice, who truly is a leader on purpose. I'm so glad we met. Shout out to Camelia, who introduced us both. Go check episode 39 with Camelia Barada if you missed that one. Rania is a Palestinian-American constantly fighting for the humanity that unites us all. She has forged a life path as a voice for the silenced. Whether it's raising up the issues of gun violence, climate change, immigration, women's issues, or foreign policy, she fully invests her heart in every endeavor. For over 20 years now, Rania has been lending her expertise across political, nonprofit, and corporate spheres. She notably worked with Bernie Sanders' 2016 run for US president. Rania has received many accolades and awards for her work, including the Exceptional Woman of Excellence Award presented by the World Economic Forum and the Women of Purpose Award presented by the Purpose Project. Rania, it's a true privilege to have you with us here today. You just landed in Morocco, braved the weather, and made it to the studio. Welcome to Leaders on Purpose podcast.
Thank you so much. Thank you for having me in all of my jet-lagged glory.
Well, it's a true privilege to have you. And I really want to start off by saying, from all the conversations we had before we even met and recorded this podcast, each time we were talking about the work you were doing and everything you were dealing with, it just brought out that assertive energy out of me. It really is inspiring, and this is what this podcast is all about. It's really a safe space for us to be vulnerable and also to inspire each other to keep on growing and evolving. So thank you again for being here.
Thank you.
So I'd love for us to start by sharing with us your journey. Like, how was it to grow up as a little girl in a Palestinian family? What are some of the battles that you fought for during your career? And has there been any pivotal moment where you knew that you were going to devote your life to advocacy and fighting your battles?
All such good questions, and I feel like they're perfect because they lead one right into the next. So as you maybe can imagine, growing up as a Palestinian girl in a traditional family, I always have to say I love my culture and I love my family and I love my heritage. It was not always easy, though. And that's the reality. I mean, in every culture and every race, ethnicity, religion, etc., has its own challenges. But that was sort of my challenge as a little girl, were some of the traditional roles that girls are supposed to play as they turn into women, and boys are supposed to play as they turn into men. And my family very much adhered to those sorts of principles. And then my poor parents ended up with a daughter like me, and that all went out the window. There's still, I often joke, my parents tolerate me now. We're very, very close, but they would rather have a daughter that stayed at home and have more grandkids and things like that. But I do think that upbringing of really, even as a small child, wanting to be seen and heard very much has led me into this path that I found myself on, which was not intentional. I had absolutely no intention of doing what I do for a living when I was younger. In fact, I wanted to be a doctor. I wanted to be an orthopedic surgeon. Medicine still fascinates me. My brain does not fully function that way, but I have always, since I was a little girl, leading into being in high school and then in university, really have focused in on justice and equity as my life's purpose, even before I knew that that was my life's purpose. And so after a life-changing experience in El Salvador, I decided that medical school was not going to happen for me. And as I said, was not my intention to work in this space forever, but here I am almost 24 years later, still doing this work.
So was that the pivotal moment, the Salvador experience? Tell us more about that.
Yeah, so I was in El Salvador doing art therapy with gang members, actually. They were boys and young men who had been kind of cast aside and told that they would never amount to anything, and they sort of found this familial structure within these gangs. But it obviously wasn't always the healthiest or the best decisions being made. But they really, I mean, it was so clear they were craving family, and belonging and to be loved and to be told that they can be something and be someone. And I was so, so fortunate to just get to be with them and learn from them. We did art installations all over San Salvador. They started a radio station that they're still running. It's really incredible. And I came back from that first trip with my whole life plan turned on its head.
I can imagine.
Understanding that I didn't want to be in school for 8 more years after college. I really fell in love with these boys and young men, and just the idea of being able to provide humanity and love in spaces where they are so often missing.
Yeah.
So that was very much a pivotal moment.
Wow, thank you for sharing that. And tell us more about some of the battles that you, like, during your career, what are some of the causes that you covered?
Oh, there's so many. A lot of my work, if you sort of look at it on paper, it may seem very disjointed. Like, what does gun violence have to do with climate change, have to do with women's health, have to, and the reality is all of these issues intersect at the point of justice. And again, humanity, and this idea for me that, we're citizens of the planet first. We have a shared humanity, and so often we get sort of put into our corners of, I am a woman, I am a man,
Labels.
I am a this. Yes, all the labels that tend to divide us rather than understanding first and foremost, we're all human beings.
Exactly.
And so all of these issues, they are all very, very difficult and complicated, especially when you look at a lot of U.S. policies, but in global policies too, quite frankly, but they all, in my mind, they all make perfect sense. They all work together.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And why do you think you're fighting these battles, though? Like, we can feel the passion and the purpose. It's, obvious, but why do you think deep inside you're fighting these battles? Because you could just choose like a very calm and normal life without exposing yourself, but yet you didn't make that choice. So why?
I think, again, just coming back to being Palestinian has dictated in some ways this path for me. Partially, my parents immigrated to the U.S. to give my brothers and I a better life and more freedom and all of these things. And I don't think they quite had me in mind when they did that. But it's one of those situations where I'm a big believer, if you can help, you should. If we can help, we should. And so just by chance, I have all of these experiences. I know how to deal with press. I know how to help start a nonprofit. I know how boards of directors work. I know, so all of these different things that often come into play. And not everybody has necessarily done all these different kinds of things. So I can be a little bit of a one-stop shop sometimes. And so for me, it really is just that call that I feel very fortunate. I mean, I'm not saying life has always been easy and there haven't been challenges. Of course there have been, but I do have a certain amount of privilege where, I can say whatever I want without the threat of being arrested necessarily. I can sort of operate freely. I can own my own business. I can do all of these things. Not to say there aren't any consequences, but I'm not in danger necessarily because of these decisions. And that is a privilege. And I feel like I'm meant to utilize that in ways to help people.
That's amazing. And because you do that, I can imagine that you're facing conflict day in, day out, speaking out against mainstream views sometimes.
Yes.
I, to be honest, am someone that is not necessarily in their comfort zone when faced with conflict. And I think many in the audience can relate to that. In the corporate world, it can get emotionally tough sometimes.
Yeah.
What can you share with us in terms of, facing conflict and navigating through it?
I will tell on myself first and say that I don't particularly like conflict, but I find myself in the middle of it.
Okay.
So much. So then sometimes that's translated to she likes conflict. Not exactly accurate. But I think coming back to the idea of humanity, and it's not always easy. I very often have to catch myself in moments of just being so frustrated and wanting to call somebody dumb because they don't know something. That's obviously not helpful, in any way. And understanding that if somebody's asking a question, even if it's frustrating, it's an opportunity to kind of come together and have a deeper, more meaningful conversation in a safe space that you may not otherwise be able to have. And I feel like so much of my work, even in corporate world, is to challenge corporations to do better. There's such an outsized influence that corporations have on any number of things, policies, the way that they treat different marginalized communities, what they sort of put forward as priorities as a corporation that they want to center, even as internal value systems.
Yes.
You know what I mean? So there's so many opportunities to do great things and have a big influence. And oftentimes there's just such a lack of recognition that they have that kind of influence. And so I feel like part of my work in this world is to show them the impact that they can have and then push them to do better. So there's always window dressing, as I call it. I shouldn't say always. There's often window dressing where a corporation or any entity will put out an email or social media post and it's got this really beautiful language and it makes you feel warm and fuzzy, but there's nothing behind it. And so that's part of what I challenge people that I work with too, is great, say all the warm fuzzy things, but put something behind it.
Yeah.
So there's all these different opportunities. Internal facing, like I said, value systems within a corporation or an entity, and then external too, external impact.
Yeah. Can we dig a little bit deeper into what sort of impact or concrete things that a company could put in place, like to go further than just marketing or just sending the email?
Yeah, absolutely. So for example, this is happening right now in the US, it's Black History Month. And there is this tendency, like I said, to put out the email, Happy Black History Month and all of these things. Meanwhile, that company doesn't even have pay equity within their own walls. Meanwhile, that company might be participating in slave labor practices in other parts of the world. I mean, there's all these different things that are happening simultaneously as that post or that email is being put out.
Yeah.
So that is just one example, because it's happening right now, that comes to mind. But then also, working with some companies on making childcare readily available.
Yes.
I mean, it's so expensive. And I don't have my own children, but I know how much goes into making sure, making sure your kids are taken care of and you feel comfortable. And if parents want to work, allowing for that to happen too, not because your hands are tied because childcare is so expensive. So things like that as well, where again, employers and corporations and different entities can just have such a huge impact in so many different ways.
Absolutely. And also like just generally walking the talk and not just...
not just talking about it.
Talking about it. Absolutely. Yeah. And another topic I wanted to touch on is you created your own company. It's all women. I believe that was very intentional, right? You have clients in the US and all over the world, and you managed to create a sort of an environment where it is safe to question psychological safety. So tell us about how you managed to put that in place and like what are some of the values that you've built your business around?
I love this question so much because it was very intentional, and I still am given a hard time because I very intentionally only hire women.
Okay.
And so some people have feelings about that. I work with men. I mean, there are men that, but the reason, first of all, I started my company because I've been involved in politics for so long. I've also been involved in advocacy and coalition building, and I've always wanted to do both and was always told I couldn't do both. So the best way to get me to do something is tell me I can't. So they told me I couldn't, so I started my own company, and I do. As I was building, of course, for the first few years, it was just me. You know how it goes. You
Absolutely.
build and grow. But as I was starting to grow, I kind of sat down with myself and had this conversation with myself. And one of the things that I think is so important is mentorship. And I have all these mentees who I absolutely adore. A lot of them are young women. And I was noticing how they were coming to me with the same traumatic stories and abuses, quite frankly, that I had dealt with decades before.
Yeah.
And they were saying the same things. And I just was like, when does this stop? When do we say enough? We're not putting up with this. No, it's not about keeping my head down and just doing the work and one day everybody will notice. No. So as I'm sort of putting all these pieces together, I'm realizing I have an opportunity. I'm growing my team. We're doing very important work that a lot of people are interested in. And so I made that decision that it was going to be about not just business, but about allowing for conversations and allowing a space to say, we don't put up with this. There's no amount of money, there's no amount of influence or proximity to power that makes harassment, abuse, toxicity worth it.
Yeah.
And part of that, process of hiring team members and growing and expanding is part of the onboarding process is really, really impressing upon each team member that I'm going to make decisions and you're going to have questions about them. And I'm challenging you to ask those questions. I want you to. This is not a place where you just nod and say, okay, yes, I'm going to do that. And it's worked. I mean, so far, there have been times where we have fired a client because they were wildly misogynistic and I'm just not willing to put up with it. And I have had members of my team come to me and say, can we understand that was a really big retainer? And I'm always honest, very honest about the fact it's scary for me too. I'm not going to pretend like, oh, it's so easy and everything's fine. But the thing I always come back to and I share with my team is we are always clearing space for something that's aligned and something that's correct. And when we're filling that space with something that's so misaligned, it's not just the toxicity of the client or whatever. It is the energy that it takes to do something that's misaligned.
Yeah.
It takes it all, me personally, I shouldn't talk for everybody. I get sick,
So true. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And I love that you mentioned the energy aspect of it. It can really get draining. And it's really also about, just putting ourselves in the right level of vibration.
Yes, exactly. Yes, that's exactly it. And I think I really am a firm believer, not to get too woo-woo here, but I am a believer in vibration and differing vibrations and what that does to us as human beings and what it does to the energy we put out in the world too.
I want to go back to the conflict aspect in the corporate world and getting more insight from you about navigating conflicts in the office. As I said, a lot of it, I believe, comes from fear. Trying to be either the peacekeeper or not annoying the colleague or not talking back to the boss. What can you share with us about that? And what would be a better way to reframe it?
Yeah, I love this question so much because I think fear can be such a driving force in our personal lives and our professional lives and all these different things. And especially as we're coming into this age of innovation and lots of changes that can be terrifying. It feels scary. Is my job safe? Is this work going to be available to me later? Is AI going to take over everything? And I will, again, tell on myself, AI does scare me, but I also see the opportunity here.
Yeah.
And that is, to me, that's the reframe. How can we make fear actually an opportunity and not allow fear to be the driving force? I don't know that I'll speak for myself. I don't know that I've ever made a decision out of fear that ended well.
Okay,
And so, and I really do believe this begins at the top. This begins at the leadership level. What kind of, back to values,
Yes.
what kind of values and community are you building within your own team? Whether you are a C-level executive or you're at a director level with a team underneath you. So often what we see from junior level staff is their behavior is a reaction to their leadership.
True.
And so how do we open the door to make it okay to be wrong? You know what I mean? And being wrong, not being a negative, but again, being an opportunity to learn and grow. One of the words, phrases you use is psychological safety, which I've been digging into so much. This idea from a personal level of, I have these ideas, but I'm afraid to speak out because what if I'm wrong, or it's going to upset the things how they usually go and how we've always done it this way, and I don't want to disturb. And what impact do you have? What are you doing? How are you being part of the innovation and growing all together if everybody's just sort of sitting quietly and afraid to say anything? So I think the short answer is turning fear into an opportunity versus a driving force that makes us do or not do something.
Yeah, I like that very much. Yeah. So that leads me to my next question, which is, how do you deal with fear, and what are you most afraid of?
Lots of therapy. First and foremost, I am a big believer in normalizing therapy. All of us have been through something, varying degrees.
So true.
Varying levels. But I do think that being able to utilize the different modalities to process through, whether it's trauma or debilitating fear or whatever it is, I think is just it's so useful. And I think my biggest fear, I think, is not having an impact, is not utilizing whatever I can to really be a part of solutions. Because it's, I'm not perfect and I've made mistakes, and as we all have, and it's easy to sort of get tired, and we hear the term burnout a lot, all of these things, but I really believe deeply in the work that I do. And so there is this sort of constant fear of wanting to make sure I do that work justice.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's a big fear.
I resonate with that one so much. I definitely have this fear also of not, reaching my true potential, or missing out on an opportunity to create impact, and that was one of the reasons that made me quit corporate and launch my own company, is really not looking back and just regretting not giving it a shot. So I definitely resonate with that one. Thank you so much for sharing. Now, Rania, obviously I cannot not go there with everything happening in Gaza. I would like to ask you where you find your strength in very difficult time. And, it is a very difficult time for all of us. And also, how do you take care of your mental wellness and your mental well-being?
Yeah, it's, again, a lot of therapy and trying to keep in touch with my family there as much as possible. And also leveraging, I've worked in politics for a very long time. I have a lot of high-profile relationships, and they don't always want to hear from me right now, but kind of forcing it. I've developed these relationships and nurtured and done a lot of things for a lot of people. And now I feel like this is my very specific time to go to them and say, you can't look away. You can't make excuses. You can't pretend like it's not happening. You're seeing what I'm seeing. And part of it, back to the previous question around fear, one of my other greatest fears is losing everything, because I've been in that position not that long ago. And I think, I don't remember if I shared with you, but I've lost clients because I'm Palestinian. I lost my literary agent recently because I'm Palestinian. And so it's a very real fear, but it's also an understanding of, if not now, if not in this moment, right now, when we're literally seeing genocide play out in front of our eyes, and so much complicity from a global perspective, the US being one of the worst actors, of course, how can I not participate and do everything that I can to end the suffering? And I always say, no matter how you feel about anything, at the end of the day, there's at least 12,000 dead children, at least, that we know of. And I don't care who you are or where you're from, kids are off limits, or should be. And so we're sort of existing in this time where excuses are being made to slaughter kids, not to mention, everybody else that's losing their lives and their families and their livelihoods. So it's a very difficult time. And this is, again, where therapy comes into play, and then just using every tool that I have at my disposal to end the suffering.
Yeah, and you've worked obviously on so many things these past months, and I know you facilitated conversations also with celebrities in Hollywood, and there was this letter which was insanely successful, I think, to President Biden. Many celebrities like Jennifer Lopez, I think, Drake, and Dua Lipa, just to mention a few. Can you share with us that experience, and maybe what leadership skills or communication skills you had to put forward in order to make it happen?
Absolutely. So that letter was organized by me and a small collective of individuals who mostly come from movement spaces, but some are celebrities themselves or influencer types. It's a very small group of people who really came together. And this group has been working on issues around justice our whole lives. I mean, you'll find that sort of common thread with all of us. And it was, even the letter itself is very intentionally centering humanity in general, understanding that we can hold the suffering of multiple people at the same time. And it's not, we sometimes call it trauma Olympics. It's not trauma Olympics where like yours matters more, mine matters more. It's really, again, back to collective humanity.
Yeah.
And so the process was, there are some people, US celebrities, who have been very vocally pro-Palestinian sovereignty and self-determination for years and years and years. So they were, as you can imagine, the first people to sign on. And then it sort of, a lot of the names that are on that list, interestingly, are not people that I've worked with before. And so this is the reality of where we are. You can't ignore what's happening. So people were Jennifer Lopez is one of them, and Selena Gomez and some others who reached out to us to sign on because they just couldn't ignore the facts that we're seeing live and on display. And so I think it's still a scary prospect. I mean, we've seen some actors have lost their agents, some have been fired off films. But it's sort of this moment of, when the history book is written, what side of history do you want to be? Exactly.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So I think, I can only imagine a lot of communication, explaining, trying to also meet the people at their level they are with their knowledge about the situation, and which is not always
Yeah.
Easy, I can imagine.
It's not, but it was, again, back to opportunity. It was an opportunity because I was getting the same phone call over and over and over. And again, from celebrities I've never worked with before, but asking very similar questions. So I finally put together a document, kind of a historical context document.
Interesting.
It includes articles and films to watch and social media handles to follow and all different, interviews to listen to, all the different things, in an attempt to say, okay, look at this. This is your baseline of understanding. And then let's talk so we can have a deeper conversation about the here and now and what are we talking about moving forward. And it's been an opportunity. It's probably something I should have done a long time ago. I just didn't. And so while this is devastating in a way that's hard to even articulate, it's not new. And it's so important for people to understand that the suffering is 75 years in the making. And I often talk about, I'm an American citizen, and the way I'm treated when I go to see my family, and I'm an American. So imagine if you're Palestinian and not an American citizen, how much worse it is. So, all of these things, it's all just an important time to leverage, I think, everything that we have to end the suffering and really make sure we're moving forward in a way that centers just peace for everyone.
Absolutely. Peace for everyone. Rania, there is so much more we can talk about, but it's time for us to wrap up this episode. I really didn't feel the time flying. Before we do so, I'd like to ask you 3 quick questions. Just to end this episode on an inspiring note. What's the best piece of advice that you have ever received?
Oh, that's so good. This is maybe going to be a little bit controversial, but I'm just going to say it because it's
Go
good.
ahead.
The best piece of advice, and it's like on t-shirts and things like that too, but one of my mentors said to me, carry yourself with the confidence of a mediocre white man.
Okay.
And I was like, yeah, that makes sense to me.
Okay. Now, what's the worst piece of advice that you have ever been given?
Ugh. Okay, I should not be able to answer this so quickly, but it makes me crazy when people, and it's such a common idiom. It's not personal, it's just business, or don't take it so personally. Don't ever say that to me, because everything that I do is wildly personal. And that's not to say, to each their own, firm believer, but for me, the work I do is who I am. So it's all personal.
Okay. You got the message. Now, what is something you wish people would see in you that you think everyone misses?
You know what? I think coming back to something we talked about earlier, which is this idea that I love conflict. Like I like to exist in this place. It's not true, and I understand where that comes from. And I've had people tell me that they're afraid of me, and I'm a really nice person. I'm a very nice person, unless you give me a reason not to be. So I think it's some of that, of understanding if you cross a line, we will go to the mat over it. But as long as we're being honest with each other and having real dialogue, I'm not going to get angry. And I'm not going to, so.
Well, you're definitely a nice person. I can attest to that.
Thank you.
Rania, thank you so much for sharing your insights and your expertise and your experiences with us. I appreciate you so much. Any final word you would like to share with us before we wrap this up?
I think just reiterating that fear can be debilitating, but it can also be a massive, wonderful opportunity.
Amazing. Thank you so much.
Thank you.